My name is Vanta Archibald. Teaching was my first career, but at the same time, I describe myself as a retired librarian. After 17 years of teaching and 3 years at UWI in Jamaica, I actually went to the public library as a chief librarian. And I was there for 19 years. Wow. And so as I said, I refer to myself as a retired librarian. But I'll take teaching because that was my first choice.
What made you choose teaching?
Well, I suppose, well, I love teaching because in school, I love most of my teachers. I had a thirst for learning. I used to like reading. And I suppose a lot of the teachers thought that I should be a teacher. And at the same time, you see, at that time, you didn't have many options. Teaching was probably the best.
Now, what schools did you begin your teaching career in?
I started right here in Tabernacle, and I had about over 15 years right here in Tabernacle. Right. And then I did some small, like say 3 terms or 3 months teaching at Keon, Mansion, at Irish Town, and at St. Johnson Village. It used to be then, it is now Dr. William Connor.
School, yes. I understand that the structure in terms of the classes back then were different to what the structure is today. Could you please explain that to us?
Classes range from junior standard to 7th standard back then. You came to school at 5 and you left at 16. In terms of promotion to higher class, you were promoted by ability, so that if you were not learning in the class you're at, you'll stay there until you learned, which meant that there were classes where you had a great range in ages. You might have a 6-year-old in the same class with a 10-year-old because of the fact that they did not promote you unless you had learned what you're supposed to learn.
Right now we're at the site of one of the areas that was used as a school building for the old elementary school that was here in Tabernacle.
Yes.
Could you identify to us what classes you taught while at the old school?
While at the old school, when I started with the juniors and went on to the older ones, but the majority of the time I was teaching, I taught seniors, the older children. The average class in those days were maybe sometimes 40-something.
Wow.
So, and even sometimes 60, so that the classes sometimes had to be shared by 2 teachers.
Was there anything that made teaching back then difficult for you?
Oh yes. Teaching was difficult. Well, there were good things, but what we found most difficult is the fact that there were large classes and there were small spaces. And a number of classes would share one room. So it meant a lot of distraction, because you'll be teaching one class and somebody will teach in another, and it was confusing then. Another thing that made it difficult is that some of the children could not always be at school, so there was a lot of irregularity, because some of them had to help their parents to work. They would go in the morning and then they would leave sometimes and go back in the afternoon, so sometimes they would stay away for a day or 2. So that again was a problem. But basically you found ways around it.
All right. Now, in terms of the students that attended the old school, the old elementary school, where did they come from? What villages were they from? Were all of them from the village of Tabernacle?
Oh no, Tabernacle was, that produced most of the students. But you had, people came from Mansion, from Bellevue, and from Sadlers also. So it was quite a wide community that fed the school with children.
Teachers today use a lot of technology in the classroom. computers, projectors to actually deliver their lessons. I'm just curious to know, what sort of materials did you use back then as an old school teacher?
Well, there was the inescapable chalk and board. And as a matter of fact, that is why I left teaching for the library, because I suppose it affected me, and then I had problems with my voice. But there was that, and of course, for teaching aids, we use a lot of local stuff, like the seeds, certain seeds, depending on what you're teaching, or shells and covers of bottles, anything like that. Because, you know, a lot of the fancy stuff that you would have now, we didn't have them. So we used what we had, and we were able to do with those. The books that were used then were mainly out of England. You had things like the West Indian, Nelson's West Indian Readers. That was compiled by Cottridge, and I don't know whether you know, there's a song that Sparrow sings about, he would describe it as being, of being taught nonsense. In the fact, he was, you know, there's this book in where you read about the twisty and twirly were two screws, and Mr. Mike went to school on a bike, and the fig, the fig and the jig. But what you realize now is that these were really teaching you, you know, how to listen to sounds, and it was sort of phonics. But it's the way they were taught that he was really, you know, making parody of. Later, we have had other books like the Caribbean Readers. I don't know if you would have used those, the Caribbean Readers.
Used those in school.
Right, and but most of the books that we read were either England, Canada, America, until later you got because the Caribbean Readers were written by West Indians. West Indian scholars from the UWI.
As a teacher myself, I usually have a lot of interesting moments with my students. I'm just wondering, as a teacher yourself, what is your most memorable moment as a teacher?
Well, I think I had more than you have, or that you'll ever have, because we really had a lot of good times then. And one of the most memorable experiences I had in Tabernacle School as a teacher is having one of my students actually win the national elocution contest. That was put on while we were celebrating statehood. I don't recall the text now, but the young lady who did it, Eliza Carey, she was really very good. She won in St. Kitts, and then when the Nevis contestant came over, she also won. So I was really pleased, not only for her, but for the school.
Now, the school was then transferred at a point in time to the Tabernacle All-Age School. Now, what was that transition like, and what were some of the major changes that occurred?
Okay, the transition, it was easy because mainly what was done is that we left that physical building and went to another that was newly built, and it was therefore, it had modern features, and it gave each class a room. So one of the interesting things is that teachers were able to be more flexible and innovative because of the physical atmosphere, you know. The classes were smaller because at that time we had started getting some persons to go to the Bastia High School and to the what we call the Bastia Senior School. And so the classes became small, and so the teachers were able to do a lot more with them. The grouping, well, the classes were also renamed. They were now from kindergarten to grade 10.
So from standards to
yes,
grades, basically.
Kindergarten and grade 10, but up to grade 10.
Okay.
And teachers started doing what you call subject teaching. At that time, I was teaching English language, English literature, biology, and something called anatomy, physiology, and hygiene, which is now called human and social biology.
All right.
Okay, and so you had some grouping because they were grouped separate, differently. Now the children were put in classes according to their age. So the 5-year-olds together, 6-year-olds, 7, which meant that by the time they got to grade 10, they were nearing 16, and that is where they left school.
In your opinion, is the school system of today an improvement on the old system?
Oh yes, a vast improvement. For instance, technology was introduced. A wider range of subjects were taught, and the students had the opportunity for tertiary education. On the other hand, the morals, the values, the discipline, things like that, communication skills that we were expected, that we have been accustomed to, they all went down the drain.
In terms of recreation back then, what sorts of activities did the children used to get involved in?
They played a lot of games, jumping, skipping ones, wing ones, all these types of games were played. Then there was a lot of sports, what we used to call recess or break time. They would pitch marbles, they would play something called rounders. Then you had the hand tennis. At the same time, on Fridays, there used to be what we'll call a long recess. And the students would get so creative. They would have what we call weddings. They would actually use the bee bush right outside there and dress the ladies up, and then they would have a feast, a wedding feast, using all the types of fruits that you can find around here. So they had fun. They had a lot of fun. And even after leaving school, they would, in the evenings, hear stories from the older people. So that kept them going. And of course, there were some of them who read a lot.
As a former teacher, and teachers tend to leave their mark on their students. And I'm sure that you can see or have some evidence of your stamp that you have put on this community of Tabernacle. Can you give us an idea of what sort of fruits do you see as a result of you being a teacher?
That's a tricky one, in that I always think of us teachers at the Tabernacle School working as a team, you know, and so when I see persons who've passed through the school doing so well, I just think of it as the Tabernacle School product. But there are some persons who would actually talk to me and they would say, you know, that I was able to do this and that for them. And actually, quite a few of the persons who passed through my hands, they've made it very big outside there. We've had ministers of religion from this very village. I can think of two right now, Stedworth Lee and Charles Seaton. They both went that way. Then we have ministers of government. We have economists. We have managers of hotel, people in real estate. And these are people who I actually taught. Tabernacle School has a very rich heritage. We've had very good headmasters and mistresses, and the staff has always been very supportive. We have made a lot of firsts in the education process during the time way back when a lot of the modern amenities weren't around. I think, was the first school that actually started wearing uniform. And the thing is, the uniforms that we got together and decided on happened to be the same thing that is being worn at the Keon High School right now. We also used to have what you call a sports day. That was, I mean, the things that we did then was amazing because we did not have the environment to do it, and we went down to the pasture. We raced horses, we raced bicycles, we had all sorts of games. And at that time, Tabernacle was doing it. So I think that anyone who passed through the Tabernacle School should be a proud individual. I know I am.
To enjoy any kind of happiness, knowledge is the key to success. Children go to school and learn well.